All right, well, technical difficulties, we've worked them out, so let's go ahead and get started on yet another lovely Intro to C# lesson. Before we begin, I would like everyone to take a few minutes and write this out to the console in a program. Write out to the console, 42 is the answer, and I want you to write it out 10 times. We'll take a few minutes to do this while I'm talking here, okay? So please accomplish that. Once you have done this, put something directly in front of your laptop so that I can see that you are done. And I'll keep yakking here, okay? 42 is the answer. I want you to write that out to the console 10 times.
Like type it?
I want you to write code that will write out to the console, 42 is the answer, 10 times. 10 veces for those of you listening in Spanish. Okay, let's talk about repetition. Repetition is also commonly known as looping, and this is a concept that exists in many languages. As you are typing right now, you're probably getting a little bored of writing the same line of code over and over again, or maybe copying and pasting, okay? Because as soon as you're done, I was planning on telling you that 52 is now the answer and to go fix your code. Yeah, moan. There was a moan in the class. I'm the worst. Yes, you are right. And this is, yeah, I meant to do that. You will learn through pain today, right? So repetition is a way that we can repeat the same statements without copying and pasting or writing them over and over again, okay? There's lots of reasons why you would want to repeat statements rather than write them over and over again. Okay, so repetition is a way that you can repeat execution of a set of statements. And we accomplish repetition in C# in a few different ways. Okay, first off, repetition is something that you are already doing. Who drove to work today, or who was driven to work today? Right, no one flew? All right. So you parked the car, or the car was put in park, and you got out, and you did repetition. You took a step until you reached your desk and sat down, okay? The statement or code that would be repeated if we were writing a program there is take a step. I've got one Motivosity dollar for anyone who can tell me how many steps it is from their current parking spot to their desk. 137. I will challenge you later. No, yeah, so you repeated a statement, take a step until a condition was met, I have arrived at my desk. Okay, and that's exactly what we do in C#. We want to repeat certain statements until a condition is met, okay? We write loop statements, and generally speaking, a loop statement uses a keyword. We're gonna use for each, while. There's another loop that we're not even gonna talk about called the do-while loop. Those are all keywords. Today we're gonna focus on for and while loops, okay? So you always have to use a keyword as the first thing, just like an if statement or an else statement, we use a keyword, and then we use curly braces to group statements in with that if statement or loop, okay? The difference here is, just like an if statement, there's a set of parentheses with a Boolean condition and sometimes more inside the parentheses, all right? For every time the Boolean condition is true, we will repeat the statements inside the loop, okay? So let's first talk about a while loop. Here's an example of a while loop. All right, we use the while keyword. You can see here on my example that the while keyword is a keyword because it's highlighted in purple, right? So we've got the while keyword and then a set of parentheses. And inside of parentheses is a Boolean statement like we learned, right? That says if the value of variable I is less than 10, go down, find the following set of curly brackets, and repeat the statements inside of curly brackets until I is no longer or less than 10. So let's walk through this real quick. Follow the little cursor. So execution starts here. We declare this variable, give it a value, declare this variable, give it a value. Then we come down here and we say while I is less than 10. First off, is I less than 10 at this point in the program? Yes. Yes, it is. So we go into the curly brackets and we print out console, or we print out my new favorite number is what?
0.
0.
No.
And then we increase the value of I by 1. Then execution comes right back up here and executes the Boolean statement. What's the value of I at this point? It is 1, because this statement right here increased its value. So is 1 less than 10? Yes, it is. We enter the curly brackets, execute these statements. My new favorite number is
1.
And then I becomes
2.
Right? And then we come back up here and we repeat these statements and this condition until this condition returns false. Okay, so eventually we're going to get to 10, right? My new favorite number is 10 or 9, and then it becomes 10 right here. Is 10 less than 10?
No.
No, it's not. So we skip the curly brackets and go on executing our program. Okay, let's debug through this real quick. I'm going to open Visual Studio Code and I'm going to write basically this same loop. And I'm going to zoom in. How's that in the back? Is that okay?
No, it's too big.
Too big? How's that? Is this okay? Bigger?
Previous one was better.
Previous is better. Yep. So my current wife said. So let's do this. Int, caps lock is on. Int I is equal to 0. And I want to write the same loop while I is less than 10. Blah. Okay, I have added, there's an error in this program, and I will show you what it is here in just a minute. If you know it, don't call it out, okay? This is something that new programmers do all the time, and their computers melt down. All right, so let's run this code. Let's debug it, actually. So I want to add a breakpoint here, and I'm going to go debug. Let's debug. And the terminal is way too big. All right, here we are. We're declaring a variable called I. The value of I is 0. Is 0 less than 10? Yes, it is. So we come here, print out the number, and we come up here. What is going on here? I is still 0. Is 0 less than 10? Yes, it is. Print out the line. Compare again. Is 0 less than 10? Yes, it is. And this is called an infinite loop. This is your very first computer virus, right? Your program will execute infinitely until some other process kills this process, or your computer's memory melts and it dies, okay? What's wrong here? Why is this an infinite loop?
We forgot to add the plus plus.
I forgot to increment my counting variable. That's right. So the value of I will always be 0. So 0 is always less than 10. And this is like talking to a toddler here. My new favorite number is 0, 0, 0.
Can you make that stop?
Yes, it's very painful. Like I said, today is learning by way of pain. All right. So yes, we will use the post-incrementation operator as soon as we get our capitalization correct. And this time I'm not going to debug. This time I'm just going to do a, oh. Come back to me, terminal. Where are you, buddy? Oh, thank you. Yep, I've written code before. All right, kill Visual Studio Code. Bring it back to me, buddy. All right, there we go. Program exited. So this is a while loop. Does anyone have any questions about while loops?
So just for my clarification, the I is the integer. Plus plus means you're adding 1 to it, and it's shorthand for just plus 1.
Yes, this statement right here is shorthand for I is equal to I plus 1. Those two statements are the same.
And the reason it is plus 1 is because the original value of I was 0. sorry, I'm not understanding.
That's okay. Let's step through it. So right here, we declare I equal to 0. I is less than 10. We do this and this. And then 0, the value of I, plus 1 is 1. We assign it back to I.
Great.
Then we come up here. The new value of I is 1. I, or 1, plus 1 is 2. Assign that back to I. So we're overwriting the variable I with each iteration of the loop. That's one thing I want to bring up to you. Iteration of the loop, right? That means one time checking the condition and one time executing the stuff inside of curly braces. That makes up an iteration. So for the loop that, or the program that we just run, how many times did we iterate, or how many iterations were there of this loop? There were 10. Right? We wrote a loop statement. It's a structure, and an iteration is one trip through the structure. It's kind of like a loop on a roller coaster, right? The looping statement is the track of the roller coaster. An iteration is a cart going around the loop, right? That cart can go around the loop as many times as it takes to, I don't know. I don't know why people go on roller coasters, but. So that's what an iteration is, okay? Any other questions about a while loop? You better ask questions while you have time. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. Okay, another way you can do loops, and there's no rhyme or reason as to why you would want to do a for loop versus a while loop. There are just some scenarios where it's better. We'll talk about why it's better to use a for loop than a while loop on Tuesday next week. But there's another way to do loops in C#, and they're called for loops. Okay, a for loop is right up here. This is an example of a for loop, okay? Lots of similar elements to a while loop. We have a keyword, for. We have a set of curly braces. We have statements inside of curly braces that will be repeated, but with a little more, all right? There are 3 statements inside of this set of parentheses rather than just one. Okay, the first statement, and the statements are separated by a semicolon, right? You can see right here. Hopefully you can see, yeah, you can see my cursor. This marks the end of the first statement. So this first statement is what we will call initialization, okay? This statement is optional. You don't have to do this, but a for loop kind of bundles a lot of the stuff that you need for looping together. We are initializing a variable, or creating or declaring or setting a value into a variable right here in this first part of the for loop, all right? We are declaring an integer variable called I and setting its value to 0. We're initializing a variable. Next, we do a comparison or a Boolean statement, right? This looks familiar to you from the while loop, right? I is less than 10. We also had this when we did the while loop. It was just not part of the loop. We also had the incrementation right here, or decrementation. Yeah. So all of these things exist in the while loop. The for loop just bundles them all together, right? Often you're going to have a while loop that could be rewritten as a for loop, and vice versa. Okay? So let's write a for loop. And the reason for writing a for loop will make much more sense when we go over arrays on Tuesday. Question?
Because I is outside of the brackets, can you call to it later on?
So the question is, with a for loop, we declared the variable I as part of the loop. Can you reference I after the loop is done? And the answer is no. Yeah, that is part of the scope of the loop. Just like last time, if we decided if you declare a variable inside of an if statement, as soon as you exit the curly brackets of the if statement, you can no longer refer to variables declared inside there because the scope is gone. It's out of scope. Okay, let's write a for loop. There's a very subtle pun coming. Here we go. So first we use the for keyword. And then what? Parentheses, very good. And just to complete my loop, I'm going to add curly brackets before I add my variables here. Then I'm going to, instead of saying int, remember it's just declaring a variable here. I can do whatever I want. So I have 4 score is 7. Yeah. Subtle pun. Did anybody get it? Yeah? Yeah? Sorry.
That was bad.
All right, this loop is going to be a little different because I'm going to go from 7 counting down. So just to show you a little difference here, I don't have to say plus plus. I can say minus minus. That takes the value of score, subtracts 1, and stores it back in score. So we're saying for the variable score, compare score to 0, and then decrement score by 1. And do the statements inside of the curly brackets every time this condition is true. Then I'm just going to add some statements in here. Okay. What do you think? Infinite loop?
Run 7 times? Is it 7 times or 6 or 8?
Let's run it.
So it ran 8 times.
Oh no! If anyone's watching on the video, always click remind me later. Always. Sorry, Austin. Okay, let's walk through this loop. Very first thing that happens is we declare this variable. This statement is only ever executed one time. We don't declare this variable with every iteration of the loop. This statement happens once, okay? This is what happens first. Then we compare, is 7 greater than 0? Yes. Then we actually jump down and do all of the statements inside of curly brackets. And then we do this statement, the incrementation or decrementation, right? And then that was one iteration, right? The next iteration starts with comparing here, then repeating all of these statements, then decrementation, right? And it goes like that. Compare, if it's true, do the statements, then decrement. Okay? Question over here, where?
So can you only have 3 commands in that for?
You must have one. Only one of them is required, and that is the comparison, right? For example, I have to have a statement here, but it can be an empty statement. And I don't have to increment here or decrement. I could do it outside of the loop. But someone would look at this code and be like, bruh, what are you even doing? Right? Why aren't you just using a while loop? You've got 2 empty statements in that for loop. Why would you do that? And there are scenarios where you'd want to do that. For example, if, like Austin pointed out, with our previous for loop, you would not have access to the score variable after the loop is done. So if you needed to know the value of score when the loop exited, then you might do something like this. But there's only one statement that's required when writing a for loop, and that's the comparison, the continuation statement. Should I continue executing the loop? This is a valid loop, I hope. Let's run it. Yep. Wonderful. Any questions?
So let's say we finish the loop and then try to reference the score again in the later statement. Does it come back to 7, or is there something that does it come
as it is right now?
Right.
So good question. Let's try it out. Any predictions?
Say,
Everybody for 7?
Oh, maybe not.
Everybody for 0?
Isn't it going to be a changing number?
it's
On this line of code,
it's only changing it
What-
while that loop is running.
what will be written out at this line of code? Everyone for 7? Everyone for 0? Undecided?
At the very end. At the very end, it'll be 0.
If it's in a for
I just
loop,
want to know what will be written out on line 16. The answer is 0.
Isn't it, why wasn't it 1?
I am totally not getting what you're doing.
Because it doesn't run it one more time. So it should be 1.
So we declare a variable called score, give it a value of 7. We come in here and we start doing stuff, right? And we actually keep overriding the value stored inside of score by decrementing 1. So when we reach this line of code, the value of score will actually be 0 because score is outside the scope of this loop. It's in the scope of this function. So anything in this function after the loop will get the current value of score, which will be 0. So let's run
If
it.
it was outside collection, then it would go back to 7?
Potentially,
After
yeah.
37.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. So 0. Outright 0 out.
I have a simple question.
Okay.
How are you making it go back like undo, and forward?
Oh,
forward?
in the code? So I am doing Control Y to go to redo and Control Z to undo.
Okay. Didn't realize that would work.
Control Z. Oh, yes. Okay. Any other questions? Great.
I have one question.
One question.
Why did, when it says console right line num num is plus score, why did it send 0 instead of num num is 0?
What? Oh, right here?
Yeah, line 11 should result in num num is 0.
It was line 16 that wrote it.
Oh, 16. So what's line 16 say? It's just score.
Yeah, it was just the score.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was it.
Yep. That was the code.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? Just a couple more concepts to get through before we start our coding practice. I've got some just fun times ahead for everyone. Okay? We talked about infinite loops. There are 2 other keywords I'd like to talk to you about. Continue and break. Okay? Everybody remember what an iteration is, right? If a roller coaster loop is, the loop statement in iteration is one time around the loop, right? An iteration in code is we evaluate the condition, we do the statements, and for a for loop, we do the incrementation or the decrementation, all right? So the continue keyword is a way to stop the current iteration and go to the next, right? For example, if I were writing a loop, let's just do it. Let's just write code all day. So I'm going to write a loop. First off, declare a variable int counter is equal to 1 while counter is less than or equal to 100. Do stuff. And the stuff that I want to do is write out the numbers. Just like that. Okay, so this should write numbers 1 through 100 out to the console, and don't forget to do incrementation. I'm going to do it on the same line this time. This is a little bit of a trick, right? There's the pre and post incrementation operators. I could put it before or after. They are not the same thing. Before means before getting me the value of counter for the statement increment, and after means get me the value for the statement and then increment, all right? Okay. So this should write out numbers 1 through 100.
So if you put the plus signs before, would it write lines 2 through 101?
Let's do it.
That's still no.
And we're scrolling. Yes, we skipped 1. Okay. I don't want to write out the odd numbers anymore. There are lots of ways I could accomplish this, but so that I can show you how to use the continue keyword, I'm going to say if counter mod 2 is equal to 0. Remember, modulus gives us the remainder of a round of division. So we're saying if the number divided by 2, if the remainder is 0, then we want to do something, and I'm going to continue. Okay? Got a little bug here. Anybody know before we run it? We minimize the console a little bit.
Are you able to increase the counter variable from the console write line?
We never will reach that. You're right. I mean, here, this is what's going to happen. Counter is 1, right? Counter is 1 less than or equal to 100? Yes, it is. Is 1 mod 2 0? No, it's not. So we'll come down here, add 1 to, we'll print it out, 1, and then we'll add 1 to counter. And then back up here, counter is 2. Then we come here, is 2 evenly divisible by 2? Yes, it is. We will continue the iteration, which means we break out of the current iteration and go back to the start of a new iteration, and the value is still 2. So we will never hit our incrementation here.
So you just move console write line counter plus plus up into the curly brackets of continue.
But you don't want print.
Where do you want it? Right
Under continue.
under continue?
Maybe above is better.
Let's try under continue.
You sounded so confident the
I
first
know.
time.
We'll see.
Oh, Visual Studio's yelling at me.
Let's see it first.
Unreachable code detected.
Hello.
So it's saying, you've told me to break out of the loop, and then you told me to write or to execute more lines of code. And it's like, no, Mom.
Get rid of stop it.
Trying to show examples of the continue keyword. Please, please. All right, what do you think? Is the bug resolved? Let's run it. Doopy doopy doo, doopy doo, doopy
Did you break
doo,
it?
loopy loopy loo. It's broken. All right, what's happening here? We have counter is a variable with value 1. Is 1 less than or equal to 100? Yes. Is 1 mod 2? Is the remainder 0? No, it's not.
Or.
And then, so we finish the iteration of the loop, never entering this if statement, and the value remains 1. And right now my computer is reaching degrees of magma levels.
So change your counter to 2.
Kill terminal. Kill terminal. Please come back. So is what we need to do is always increment. So probably what we want to do is only write out the number. Let's see, what do we want to do? Austin was correct. We don't even need the continue keyword here. But we're going to use it. What do you think? Is that going to work? Any predictions?
Do you need to put the or in between the equals, or is that just nonsense? It could very well be nonsense.
Yeah, no, we don't need to do that. So. There you go. Only odd numbers. Not exactly what we wanted because we're getting 101, but there you go. A while loop, there's uses of the continue keyword. All right. The break keyword is something we want to do when, so the continue keyword stops the current iteration but keeps the loop going with the next iteration if it's available. The break keyword stops execution of the loop. It doesn't matter how many iterations were left. It just says, I'm done with this loop, exit the loop, and go to the line of code that immediately precedes the end of the loop, or follows the end of the loop, excuse me. So let's do that. We've got this loop here that's counting from 1 to 100. And I just want to reach number 57 because, I don't know, I want to count to 57. Maybe I want to ask the user for a number, right? All right, what are we doing here? We're asking the user for a number. We're going to read it in, convert it to an int, store it in the count2 variable. So let's say I typed 57. Okay, then we declare our counting variable. And we say, is our counting variable less than or equal to 100? Yes, it is. Then we ask the question, is the counting variable equal to the number we're counting to? No, it's not. 1 does not equal 57. So we skip this if statement and we increment, right? And we're going to write it out to the console. And we're going to uncaps lock. And then we're going to increment. Okay, let's run it. There we go. We got all the numbers between here and 57 not inclusive. So if I wanted to include 57, I'd just print before I bail out. There we go. Okay, any questions about break or continue before we get to our coding practice? Great, here's our coding practice. We've got 3 programs. So very first, I want you to write a program that asks the user for the number, for any number. And once the user gives you a number, you need to store it, convert it to a number, and then I want you to print out some multiplication tables for that number. So if the user typed 6, I would like your program to do output like this. 1 times 6, 2 times 6, 3 times 6, the product up until and including the number that they typed, okay? If they typed 40, I'd want to see 1 times 40, 2 times 40, 3 times 40, all the way up to 40 times 40. Any questions about program number 1? Okay. Program number 2 is a continuation of yesterday's medium program. So yesterday we had a number guessing game, right? And they were given 3 guesses, right? And you probably copied and pasted code, or maybe you got advanced and Googled how to repeat code and didn't even need to come today because you already know loops. Doom on you. But anyway, today we're going to rewrite the number guessing game program to do a variable number of guesses. You're going to ask the user how many guesses they want, and then you're going to give them up to that number of guesses. And maybe to add a little variety to your program, you could generate a random number. The code to generate a random number is really easy to write. You just need to go to this link and implement it from there. Okay, there's like 2 or 3 lines of code. Any questions about the medium program? All right, the hard program is going to output code like, or output this. You see here, we've actually got a multiplication table like a matrix, right? So across the top, I've got numbers 1 through 10. Down the side, I've got numbers 1 through 10. And then if you do an X and Y coordinate there, you get 7 times 7 is 49, okay? I want you, for the hard program, to ask the user for 2 numbers and then generate this matrix for those 2 numbers. The first number is across the top. The second number is down the side, okay? I want it to be nicely formatted, so you're probably going to have to use tab stops. Anybody remember the escape character for a tab? /T, yeah. Yeah, a couple of you said it, so. Yep, okay. Are there any questions before we end the recording? Okay.